All right, here's the deal. You are not shooting enough competitions. If you own a gun, and I mean anybody, if you own a gun, if you are a desert LARPer like me and my homies, if you are an old dude with a 45 in the nightstand, if you're a single lady who lives in an apartment in the middle of the city, if you own a gun, you absolutely need to be shooting more competitions. Now, the first thing to get out of the way as far as competitions, the rules. Yes, the rules can be super cringy, I get it. The most overlooked aspect when it comes to the rules in any shooting sport mainly comes down to liability. Nobody likes to be treated like a little kid. I don't like that I can't just roll up to the local match with my buddies and we can't show each other our new setups at the bed of the truck. But the thing is, most local matches are held at clubs that are privately owned and they have insurance liability. You never really know who's gonna show up, so there has to be a common denominator baseline level of safety for everybody involved. The club doesn't want to have a lack of rules in place to where somebody could come back and sue them or whatever. Understand, it's not about you. It's not because you don't know what you're doing. It's not any of that. It mainly comes down to businesses and privately owned ranges protecting themselves. It also comes down to safety for people who might not be as competent as you are. And the last thing, the overly aggressive ROs, they just suck anyways. Believe it or not, there are people in this world who walk among us. They look like human beings that have zero personality. They probably don't have any friends. Their kids probably don't want to spend time with them, and their wives probably left them years ago. We don't like those people anyways, but that's not why you're there to shoot competitions. Try to not take it super personally if a league or a local club has rules that might be a little more restrictive than what you're used to shooting out in the desert by yourself. Now, getting into the nitty-gritty, the most important reason why everybody should be shooting competitions, it's performance on demand. Performance on demand, quite simply, is when you have no warm-ups, no redos, no practice runs. There's a walkthrough that you'll do. You can stage plan. You can figure out the best way to approach the targets or which order to shoot things in, or which way to run or walk or whatever first. But for the most part, the performance on demand aspect comes down to the shot timer goes off and you have to go. You have one chance to shoot as quickly and as accurately as you possibly can. Also, as a side note, if this is all kind of new to you, go get a shot timer. That's first and foremost. If you don't have one, you're definitely training wrong. Now, when it comes to that cold start, you have one run to do it as perfectly as you possibly can. There is no better way to highlight your deficiencies and get a baseline assessment on what your skill set actually is. Now, typically at matches, there's gonna be anywhere from 4 to 8 stages normally. And after you finish shooting, you might have tons of downtime between when you shot and the next time you're ready to shoot at the next stage. So really, throughout the entire competition, you're gonna have 4 to 8 cold start runs to measure your baseline skill. Now, maybe you already feel like you're somewhat competent, you know your way around your guns, you might carry one every day, or it might be your job to have one with you. You can have all of the gear and you can feel comfortable with it, but does that actually mean you're a good shooter? That's what this cold start performance on demand, you have one chance to make it happen, will actually prove to you. It'll isolate that skill set and show you actually how good you are. So when it comes to things like self-defense, military or law enforcement application, all of that type of shooting, it's all one and done. Life does not give you reshoots. That's if you're a cop, that's if you're a civilian, it doesn't matter. So being able to go from your gun is away, it's either in concealment, it's in your holster, to now I have to get my gun out and actually perform. That's a massive asset when it comes to training and understanding what you're capable of. And if you don't see how this type of training can help you in your self-defense or your military and law enforcement application, I would just say feeling comfortable isn't usually a good place to be. You should probably be testing those skills. And that yearly qualification that you have to shoot doesn't prove you can actually do anything. Competition shooting is a skills assessment. Having metrics that you tie to your performance will show you if you are actually a good shooter or not. Speed, accuracy, and consistency are everything. They're the most important skills when it comes to shooting. Anything involving a gun, self-defense, military law enforcement application, hunting, how fast, how accurate, and how consistently you can shoot are the most important aspects. Anybody who tells you otherwise probably can't shoot. Now, everybody has a little bit of an ego. If you train out in the desert with your friends, if you're current or former MIL or LEO, when it comes to training and improvement, you have to drop it. You have to get rid of that ego. There are too many guys who could be incredible shooters, but because they were in an officer-involved incident or they had served in the military or whatever, they kind of rest on those laurels and feel like their shooting is there and it's always going to be there, and if they need to draw on that in any given moment, it's going to be there for them. Well, shooting is absolutely a perishable skill. And if you carry a gun for self-defense, if you're a cop or if you're in the military, you will be a liability either to your squad, your partner, or your loved ones if you don't know how to perform with that gun. Now, being a good shooter doesn't make you a good cop or a good soldier. When it comes to training and competitions, the targets aren't gonna shoot back. That's not necessarily what competitions are for. They don't train you on footwork, on movement, squad communication, shooting in and around cover. There are plenty of other skills that you have to learn on the job if you're a cop or if you're in the military. And even if you're not, if you just have a gun for self-defense, nobody knows what they're going to do in the moment. When that adrenaline starts dumping, you might completely forget all of that training and you're gonna resort back to your baseline level of skill. This is where it gets massively important. Again, anybody who carries a gun, doesn't matter who you are, you resort back to your base level of skill. So why would you not seek to improve that base level? So even though the targets aren't going to shoot back at you in a competition, it's not force on force training, you absolutely need to improve that base level of skill if you want to defend your loved ones or if you don't want to be a liability. Equipment shakeout is the next biggest reason after the training and the skills assessment and the performance on demand that you should absolutely be shooting competition. You're gonna very quickly find out what does and doesn't work about your EDC setup, your nightstand gun, whatever type of gun you own. You're gonna find out really quickly what is and isn't going to work for you. Most people don't shoot all of their guns, or they don't shoot the few guns they own nearly as much as they should. So you're not always gonna get an accurate readout on what's working with those setups. Things like the grip length, the capacity, the manual of arms, having a red dot versus not having a red dot, the shootability of your 2.5-inch barrel. Issues with your holster, like not having a mag caddy, having inconsistent clips that don't stay in the same spot on your belt. Maybe you have a really weak belt that doesn't actually keep your holster in place. All of those things are going to become very apparent when you start shooting matches. I thought I needed to have something super tiny, super compact, single stack. Didn't really care about the capacity for concealment. That's what was going to conceal better on my person. But then when I started shooting competitions and realized that I was either pinching my hand when I was going to reload, or the really short barrel was making the gun super snappy and it just wasn't shootable under pressure. All of those things become very apparent, and you might find yourself changing things up about either the gun itself or just your daily carry setup. So assessing your skills is incredibly valuable, but also assessing your equipment and just finding out what works and what doesn't is huge. So if all you have to shoot with is maybe the gun that you keep in your purse, your nightstand gun, maybe it does or doesn't have a light on it, it might even just have irons and not even a red dot, that's fine. Take that with you. Or let's say you're a little bit more serious about your daily carry and you actually have an appendix set up like this. Perfect. Throw this on, put your fog shirt on, and get out there with your Vans and just go shoot a competition. Even if all you have is your level 3 Safariland duty holster, throw that on, go shoot a competition. You absolutely do not need an entire gamer gear race belt setup like this to get the training and the value out of a competition. You don't need this. So if you don't have this, don't buy it. Just take what you have and go shoot a match. Now, if you've gotten to this point and you've said to yourself, wait a minute, there are people that carry guns with them every single day, and you think that's a dumb idea, you can leave. We don't need you here. Now, most leagues will allow for concealment shooting. especially USPSA. IDPA wants you to shoot from concealment, but they're just kind of cringy and I think they get it wrong. There are some clubs that don't allow for appendix or concealment shooting, but if they're going to put on a USPSA match, even if it's just level 1, then they have to allow for concealment and appendix. So don't think you have to get the gamer gear to compete, go with what you have. But I will say all of that race type gear, the extended mags, the low retention holsters, all of that stuff will help you become a better shooter if you train and practice. Being a better shooter means you're gonna be able to defend yourself and your loved ones a lot better as well. So there is value in it. Now, the very last thing, iron sharpens iron. So my LARPers out there, meeting up in the desert, hanging out in mom's basement, throwing on that plate carrier is a good time. The problem is a lot of times when you're meeting up with your buddies, it becomes more about grouping up and being together. And maybe there are specific drills you're gonna run, but meeting up isn't always with the specific purpose in mind of training or goal-driven improvement. So you need to meet up with others at matches who are there with the mentality of self-improvement. That's the type of person you want to spend time with in general. Now at matches, I've met people who are into food storage, outdoor survival, hand-to-hand combat, because shooting on its own isn't the only skill you need to have. When it comes to the Second Amendment, providing for your family, distrusting the government, there's a whole litany of things you need to be capable of. You might not go to competitions, and you certainly don't have to go compete with the intention of leveling up within your class. You don't need to go with the goal of becoming a master or grandmaster level shooter. That really doesn't matter at the end of the day if you're there for improvement. However, you're not gonna move up in class if you hold on to bad fundamentals and if you don't improve as a shooter. So while reaching A class isn't necessarily the reason why you're there, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have that in the back of your mind, because hanging out with people who are better shooters, finding out what people are doing to shave off a couple of seconds on their runtime, all of that is going to mean you're going to become better as well. And while I said you don't necessarily need to invest in the gear or to change your EDC loadout, doing those things, hanging out with those people, will turn you into a better shooter, as long as you're there goal-driven with the purpose of improvement. So that's all I got for you. That's the end of it. Go out and shoot a competition. Even if you were just out in the desert LARPing with the homies, go shoot. Even if you were just at a match this past weekend, go shoot. That doesn't matter. Go shoot a competition. Doesn't matter how proficient you are. Just go shoot more.